Hey, this is Hillary Hendershot. Don't turn that dial. The music is way better and the podcast is too. You're listening to Profit Boss Radio, episode 75. Profit Boss Radio is your weekly wealth mastermind. Profit Boss is also a community and a movement for women who are ready to take control of their money, break the glass ceiling, and give ourselves permission to finally have enough. Want the secrets of wealth to be yours? This is the place. I'm Hillary Hendershot. I'm a certified financial planner running a leading advisory firm for women, and I'm sharing with you real stories from real life and real women who are making it happen. Forget Wall Street. Let's do this, ladies. Hey, Profit Boss. I am back. We're back. I'm back for good, and I'm so excited to be back. Profit Boss Radio has been on hiatus for several weeks, and I have had a lot of things, quote unquote, under construction, but I have missed you, and I'm going to give you a really quick update, and then I'll get right to today's content. In the last 8 weeks, I was so blessed to be able to hire a full-time associate financial advisor into my business. Her name is Jen, and I also kind of formalized my relationship with a lovely woman who's been working as my virtual assistant, but whose title is now Operations and Marketing Manager. Her name is Rachel, and I do believe both of these women will be making an appearance on Profit Boss Radio, so stay tuned for that. Hiring people who can do what you do in your business is a critical milestone in business because until then, if you go on vacation or get sick, the work really doesn't get done. So in services businesses especially, you've got to get to the point where you hire and train people who can interface with your clients when you're not around and maybe even bring in more clients, folks you haven't or couldn't have met, and in that way continue to grow the business. So that's all in place. And now what there is to do is build rapport, deepen and strengthen the bonds of the team so that we can work together like a well-oiled machine. Okay, more on that as we go, but I want to get right to today's content because if you're listening to this, I'm just so grateful to you for staying connected and staying subscribed, and I want to give you the goods. During my time off the air, I put resources and time into checking out what are the other financial podcasts doing. I'm here to tell you that I ain't doing that. I'm going to do things a little differently from here on in. We are going to be different. We are locking this down. We're making it ours. We're making it about us and you and what you need and what you want. That means more profit bosses who are taking financial ground are going to be featured here. I'm still going to feature experts and authors and economists, but Profit Boss is about us. This is going to be a show and a movement with backbone. There's more coming on that, but for now, to whomever listens to this first episode back, I want to say thank you. Thank you for your loyalty and thank you for your patience. We are back. So today we're here to talk about something that does have to do with the stock market. And I know that for some of you, not all of you, but some of you, whenever I talk about the stock market, you maybe want to press stop and wait for the next episode. And if that's you, let me share something with you. I feel the same way when I listen to marketing shows and they start talking about sales funnels and search engine optimization. It is not my specialty and I don't love doing it. And it's easy to shut my eyes to it. There is not a single day in my life that marketing will be a crisis for me. It's never urgent, just like stock market investing is not urgent for you. But I need good marketing to get my products and services into the hands of more people. I need those things as vehicles to make a difference in the world, provide value, and grow my own income and my net worth. So I push through the discomfort. And unless you have more money than you need the stock market to provide compound returns for you to grow your wealth and eventually arrive at financial freedom. I'm going to invite you to relate to your resistance, if you have it, your resistance to learning about the stock market in a particular way. I invite you to relate to your resistance like a money block. It's actually some subconscious thing that is keeping you from building wealth. If you're a woman, this particular money block may have roots in the male-dominated Wall Street culture. In other words, you not learning about stock market investing is a block to your wealth and could be self-inflicted misogyny. Like somewhere deep inside you, you believe that's a man's world or a man's job. To emancipate yourself and your money, it's going to take pushing through. So don't press stop, okay? As always, I promise you no Wall Street speak. Today's episode is called Why Optimism Wins. And I'll admit it, it had a different title at first. I originally called it A Complete Guide to Discrediting Doomsayers. But after I recorded that, I slept on it and I knew it was wrong. So I'm inserting this little interlude to change the title and tell you why I'm calling it Why Optimism Wins. So what we're going to talk about today is how to discredit people who say terrible things are going to happen. But the message here is really that optimism wins. The stock market is the greatest generator of individual wealth in the history of the world, and the financial news media and unqualified pundits are always trying to convince you otherwise. Optimism wins because optimism is the only realism, and what I mean by that is that life, on the whole, keeps getting better for us. We might be programmed to focus on the negative, and the news sure likes to bring that to our attention, but it just doesn't jive with the facts. Human progress is a miracle. Think about these aspects of life. Communications. The telephone was invented in 1876. Now, we no longer even use fax machines. I remember getting my first Hotmail account when I was 19 years old, and now I can talk to anyone, anywhere, anytime, at any place in the world. In fact, I've built a team in my company who live and work in 3 different time zones. Economic growth. In the early 1960s, global GDP was about $1.3 trillion. Now it's over 72 trillion, meaning we're wealthier than ever before. Also lifespan. In the early 20th century, the average expected lifespan was 31 years. Today, in some parts of the US, it's 85 years. Travel. In 1903, the Wright brothers invented the airplane and pioneered human flight. 6 decades later, we walked on the moon. And finally, stock market growth. $1 invested in the S&P 500 in 1927 would have turned into more than $5,000 by the end of 2016. That would have turned a $100,000 investment into $500 million. So that's why I'm such an advocate of you getting yourself into a good stock market portfolio, and it does matter what you invest in, and why this episode is titled Why Optimism Wins. In fact, here's an article printed on Bloomberg. I'm looking at it on my screen right now. Here's an article printed on Bloomberg on August 28th, 2017, just over a week ago as I record this. The title of the article is How the Top 1% Keeps Getting Richer. So guess how the top 1% keeps getting richer. Subtitle of the article, The Wealthiest People Invest Less in Housing and More in Stocks, which generate higher returns. This is a direct quote from that article. Houses tend to earn lower returns than stocks. This is probably a fundamental law of the economy. As long as human beings continue to find more productive ways to use resources, companies will continue to gain value relative to land and natural resources. In other words, stocks grow faster than other kinds of investments. So in a minute, we're going to go back to the core of today's content, which is an analysis of an article predicting scary stuff and a framework that you can use to discredit that article and others like it. But what I want you to gain from this content is that optimism wins. First, what's a doomsayer? A doomsayer is a person who predicts disaster, especially in politics or economics. It's like Chicken Little. The sky is falling. The sky is falling. And as you know, I do offer to answer your financial questions. And what happened is that someone forwarded me an article she found on the internet and asked me to respond to it. So this article was titled, Millionaire Warns to Get Out of Cash Now. And it was a pretty compelling article, but it's a kind of message that's published all the time. In my career as financial advisor, I've had dozens of clients forward me scary doomsayer articles with the implicit or explicit question, Hillary, is this for real? And if so, what are we going to do about it? I doubt people are going to stop trying to scare you with their predictions of financial disaster. So rather than just respond to this particular article, I decided to create a guide to figuring out whether they're telling the truth or not. Little spoiler alert here, and some insight into why I titled it A Guide to Discrediting Doomsayers is that what we don't like to accept as human beings is that the future is fundamentally unknowable. So any prediction like this is going to be flawed. But the idea that human beings can predict or know the future is like a siren song. It's so compelling. So let's really flesh this out. Okay, here's a summary of the article. First, there's this teaser about how the world's biggest banks are moving massive amounts of money out of the banking system. So this obviously piques your interest. The world's biggest banks are moving their money out of the banking system. Wait, I have my money in the banking system. So now you're reading, right? Now, enter the expert, Steve something. I really can't pronounce his last name, but it's something like Sugarud, spelled Sjugggerud. I don't know the guy, and I can't pronounce that word. Now, the article claims that Dr. Steve correctly predicted 3 major economic events in the past, and those 3 events being the tech bubble bursting in 2000, the real estate bubble that began to inflate in 2002, and the bottom of the financial crisis in 2009. And it's not really important if you don't know those events off the top of your head right now, but you as the reader are reading that he predicted these events, and it makes you think, oh, this guy must be really smart. He knows something I don't know. Now, the article says Dr. Steve is saying that you shouldn't have your cash in the bank. The biggest investors in the world are pulling their money out of the bank by the billions. And then it links you to another page where you can enter your contact information to either watch a video or download a report by Dr. Steve, I guess. So now if you're a normal human being, at this point, if you're not downright worried, you're at least paying attention, and it undermines your trust. It's upsetting. And you've probably seen other articles like this. Sometimes they're videos, sometimes they're books, but they all pretty much follow this framework. They claim something big is going on behind the scenes. They quote a so-called expert who 9 times out of 10, they claim has predicted things in the past accurately. They describe the problem they're predicting, and then they offer you their solution, their way out. So it's these kinds of doomsayer messages that this episode is about debunking. So the first thing that's happened here is your amygdala grabs you by the lizard brain. Your amygdala is that structure in your brain that stimulates your fight, flight, or fright response. Your amygdala is pretty irrational. It's really good at getting you away from bears chasing you in the forest. Okay. It's really good at that. It's not good at having you make nuanced decisions that are in your long-term best interest. So really the first step in the guide to discrediting doomsayers is to set your emotions aside. And listen, I'm not immune from this. Okay. My life's work is to steward dozens of families' financial futures, and I take that role very seriously. I obviously want to know if there are credible threats to my clients' wealth plans, right? That would behoove me. But I've also been reading these doomsayers' predictions for almost 20 years, and I know that they never pan out. Of course, it is true if a variety of people are always out there predicting a downturn, when a downturn naturally occurs, someone is going to be right. But what we don't like to believe, and what is true, is that they're actually right by luck, not skill. It's more like monkeys throwing darts. Just as an example, let's take the movie The Big Short. I'm sure many of you saw this movie. It was about the financial crisis and the mortgage liquidity crisis. And, if you think that Hollywood writers know everything and are interested in portraying the past to you in a historically accurate way, you really have to think again. The idea that there's someone who knows what's happening out there and the little people just don't get to know really is absolutely not the case. So this gentleman, Michael Burry, is portrayed as this genius. He was a doctor, and now he's a hedge fund manager, and he figures out that the U.S. housing market is built on a bubble that will burst within the next few years, right? So he leverages every investor dollar that he's got in his hedge fund. He goes out to the banks and makes these huge bets. And then when the mortgage liquidity market starts to dry up, he and his investors profit. And the way this movie is written and the way the plot goes, it looks like he's this genius who knows something that no one else knows. And he's also portrayed as really evil because as the rest of the world is suffering, he and his people are profiting. Okay, well, I have news for you folks. That's the job of a hedge fund manager, is to profit no matter what. And his profiting didn't exacerbate the suffering of everyone else. But moreover, he's portrayed like this genius, this prescient sort of Nostradamus guy. And yet the thing that people don't realize about this guy, Michael Burry, is that he hasn't made an accurate bet since then. So he hasn't made a profit or a significant profit in his hedge fund. He's got all of his money in precious metals, and really he hasn't done a thing that's worthy of any notice since the financial crisis. So I offer you to consider that instead of him sitting up in this think tanky office like a hedge fund manager knowing something that you don't know, that what's actually happening is that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of hedge fund managers always making big bets on surprising moves. There's always someone making a bet that X, Y, or Z will happen. And then when X, Y, or Z happens, he or she looks very smart, when in actuality, it's just luck. It really is just luck. And how we know it's just luck is because no one accurately predicts the future over time. No one does it more than once, really. Consider this. I once attended a conference for authors in Las Vegas. Okay. I went to this event. It's called Author 101. And one of the presenters at this conference was a really successful publishing agent. So he has purview to the entire industry. He gave one of the most promoted talks at the conference. And in his talk, he promises to answer the question, what makes a book most likely to be a bestseller? In other words, what kind of topics do human beings just have to pay their hard-earned money to read? You know, no human being can walk past a bookstore and not pick up this title. What kinds of curiosities and need-to-knows are hardwired into the human mind? And these are his answers. And obviously, he's an expert, right? And an expert at book publishing isn't really an expert at book publishing. He's an expert at human psychology. Okay. So these are his answers. The first thing human beings can't resist: voyeurism. Think in this category like biographies of celebrities, also politicians, and even murderers. Remember the book and the movie that came out about the Zodiac killer in San Francisco, right? Another topic the human brain can't resist is minimizing pain, specifically pain I know that I have. So in this category are books that solve problems like The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Everyone wants to be more effective. No matter what you're up to, you want to be more effective at it. And The 4-Hour Work Week. Now, it turns out The 4-Hour Work Week wasn't actually about working a 4-hour week, but it was a great title. And the title promises to solve a problem that people know they have. So like time is a real constraint. Time is finite. The third and final topic that this book publishing agent said people can't resist is fear. He says, if you're very clear, he said, if you, the author, can create a clear and compelling case that the reader has a problem with big costs that they don't know about and don't quite understand, your book will sell like hotcakes. For example, and I just pulled these titles out, The Millennium Bug, How to Survive the Coming Chaos. If you remember the year 1999, this topic was hot. People were afraid that when the clock struck midnight, December 31st, 1999, now it's the year 2000, life as we know it would come to a grinding halt because no one had ever put 4 digits into a date clock or something, right? So this is an example of a book that was a bestseller in 1999. Another topic, Hubbard's Peak, the impending world oil shortage. This author had people convinced that the world's supply of oil is finite. This is before we discovered the supply of oil in North Dakota in North America, and that we were going to be at the mercy of the Middle East, but then that basically every form of transportation we rely on was going to come to a grinding halt. Another topic that goes back a little further, some of you may not remember, but Some economists and doomsayers had got the idea that population of human beings on the earth was growing exponentially and that soon there would be more humans on the earth than it can contain. So this book is called The Population Bomb by Paul Ehrlich. So all these books scared people into action, but their predictions, really they were more like impassioned assertions, never panned out, never came to fruition, never happened. So take a deep breath. Optimism is still the only realism. Life on this planet keeps getting better. So far, we keep getting better at things. Science, healthcare, longevity, education. So get your fears in check. That's step one, is really just put your emotions aside. Okay, step number 2. Can you validate their credibility? A simple Google search of their name will tell you a lot. Credible economists publish and people quote them and link to them. But being well known, unfortunately, does not mean someone is credible. Take Jim Cramer, for example. Jim Cramer is a best-selling author. He's the host of CNBC's Mad Money, and he's co-founder of The Street Incorporated. People take his investing advice all the time, despite the fact that his advice consistently leads to negative returns. And you can find that easily. If you just Google Jim Cramer's investment advice, you will find pages of articles that describe to you how a stock he picks is more likely to go down than up. The economist quoted in the Crux article we're discussing today is said to have made several accurate predictions in the past. So if that were true, Google would validate it. I would expect pages of listings on Google talking about his predictions and how prescient he's proven himself to be. However, when I Google him, the first result is his profile on the Stansberry Research website. Stansberry Research is not only his employer, but also happens to own The Crux, which is the source that published the article in question, which was written in third person to make it seem more credible. In other words, they couldn't get their fear-mongering article into any credible media source that they don't own. I also come up with his Twitter profile, and you can see it at DS Juggerod on Twitter, with 1,033 followers. So not very impressive for a modern day Nostradamus, and a Wikipedia entry for Stansberry Research. Wikipedia itself warns me that the content is written like an advertisement and that his listed academic accomplishments, which are an MBA and a PhD, are missing citations. It also says that the Securities and Exchange Commission found him guilty of fraud in 2007 and that he edited various investment newsletters. So at this point, I'm kind of ready to stop reading about Mr. Steve. He's not very credible, but we're going to continue with this framework because it's important that you understand how to debunk these things, because not every Wikipedia, article is going to say that the person has been found guilty of fraud by the Securities and Exchange Commission. So on the face of things, the article that I'm talking about that is the subject of our critique du jour looks like it was written and published by a third-party media source, and that makes it look credible. But at the top of the page is the very obvious word, advertorial. So if you click on the articles to the right of the main article that make the page look like a standard media source, like it looks like it's got a bunch of news articles on it, they all either link to more Doomsayer articles written by the same source or they link out to other domains, which means this site isn't a news site at all. So far, I see nothing that leads me to believe this media source or so-called expert are credible in the least. The third and final step in the guide to discrediting doomsayers is follow the money. Why is this person publishing this article? What's in it for them? Who published the article? Who sponsored it? Who authored it? What do they stand to gain if you believe their pessimism? If it's trustworthy journalism, no one who authored or published the article should stand to gain or profit in any way. Doomsayers are always trying to sell you something. Environmental doomsayers might be trying to sell you on contributing to a cause, but I've never read something by an economic doomsayer that wasn't trying to sell an investment or investment system that they claim will subvert the problem. And 99% of the time, it's metals. They want you to invest in gold, silver, or gold or silver futures or contracts. Despite the fact that the real price of gold actually trends down over time, people relate to it like it's an anti-establishment refuge. Anytime the system gets called into question, there's a flight to gold. So these guys love to sell gold. So sure enough, I click on one of the links in this article and it leads me to another page, which is pitching a book authored by the founder of Stansberry Research called America 2020, The New Crisis. This title looks a lot like the titles of the Doomsayers books that I mentioned earlier, right? That all turned out to be groundless. Not only that, but if you check the bullet points, he is selling, yes, gold. So you don't need to buy this Doomsayer's $20 book to know that no one should follow his investment advice. Please understand that these authors are psychological experts. They spend years honing their craft and they study the responses of people. They're evil, they're manipulative, and they know exactly what to say to get you to panic. They know how to make you think that they know something you don't, and it could hurt you. It's a big ruse, carefully designed to separate you from your dollars. It's totally normal that it would get your attention. As I said, even I fall victim to it for a few moments, occasionally. It's normal. No one wants to lose money. So I hope that this guide to discrediting doomsayers saves you a lot of time and maybe some emotional suffering. I want to point out one more thing that people don't really realize about people that make economists or so-called financial experts that make predictions. Here's the thing. If you knew what direction the stock market was going, or if you knew that some big macro trend was going to happen, it makes no sense for you to tell anyone about it. Why? Because for every person who accurately acts, who acts before the thing occurs, that minimizes or detracts from your potential profit. In other words, if I know that the stock market is going up or down tomorrow, it doesn't matter which direction, because I can bet on a direction. I can bet on up and I can bet on down. That it only makes sense for me to huddle alone in my own office, leverage the heck out of my bets, and enjoy the profits afterward. So when I see this article, first of all, it introduces Dr. Steve as a millionaire who's accurately predicted 3 major events in the past. Okay, so if he's accurately predicted 3 major events, he had better be a rich man. I mean, really rich, right? Because you better bet he had some of his own dollars on that betting line. So if he's accurately predicted 3 major economic events, he shouldn't be a millionaire. He should be a billionaire. In fact, he should own his own island. And, the article introduces him as a millionaire, which I think most of America relates to as a rich person. But on Wall Street, $1 million isn't rich at all, right? So this guy should be like sickly rich, like dripping in diamonds rich. And he's not. I have 2 quotes for you to wrap things up on the hobby of forecasting or predictions. The first one is from John Kenneth Galbraith. He says, "The only function of economic forecasting is to make astrology look respectable." The second is from Scott Adams. "There are many methods for predicting the future. For example, you can read horoscopes, tea leaves, tarot cards, or crystal balls. Collectively, these methods are known as nutty methods. Or you can put well-researched facts into sophisticated computer models, more commonly referred to as a complete waste of time." Ultimately, even though we don't like to think about it this way, the future is unknowable. It's probable that things will continue to go the way that they've been going, but it's not certain. And no one knows what will happen in the future. We don't even know that the sun will come up tomorrow. So the only thing that you can do is essentially maximize the chances that you'll take advantage of macro trends. Basically, diversify your investments. So I reiterate, if you've been listening to this show, the best way to not lose money is to get yourself invested in a low-cost, risk-managed, globally diversified index or asset class-based stock portfolio and stay the course for the long term. Financial mistakes can be expensive, even unrecoverable. So I do my best here on Profit Boss Radio to help you avoid them completely. I hope you found this valuable and keep those questions coming. Come over and see me in the Profit Boss Facebook group. If you go to hillaryhendershot.com/Profit Boss, that will actually link you over to our closed and private group. You can request access. We'll let you in and you can ask your questions and make friends there. I hope to see you in the group and we'll see you next week on Profit Boss Radio.